Hello and welcome back to Vox Terra, fellow Vox Terrans. Today, you probably heard a bit that Biden let out a $2 trillion approximately climate plan. So I'm going to review for you from an article from Inside Climate News to discuss that as an opener. This Inside Climate News article gives us some insight into the politics that Joe Biden's dealing with. Now, in an earlier show, I discussed how the Bernie-crats and Bernie Sanders have a joint task force with Biden to help push him in a stronger direction on climate change. So we see some of that happening now from the article. Inside Climate News, Biden's $2 trillion climate plan promotes union jobs, electric cars, and carbon-free power. July 15, 2020. Now, as you may have seen in my earlier video, switching away from fossil fuels is a win-win for the public. Whether you accept industry propaganda that climate change isn't fossil fuel driven, which it's impossible it isn't because we're dumping billions of tons annually of the stuff into our atmosphere. But if you accept that it's not, well, no one's denying that it's bad for you to breathe in auto exhaust and diesel, and there's a lot of toxic byproducts in the refining of petrochemicals and fossil fuels. Two, that it promotes union jobs gets us past that argument about jobs versus the environment. From the article, the former vice president linked a new green economy in America's recovery from the coronavirus pandemic, saying the nation needs to build back better. Well, with that comment, I would totally agree. It's this economic system that has gotten us into so much trouble and been polluting our environment. And we are going to be spending billions of dollars rebuilding from coronavirus. Better that money is put in a greener direction. Now contrast Biden's plans, whatever we have to say against them, with President Trump's. His way to recover the economy has been deregulate, stop enforcement. And I showed that in other videos as well as promote the expansion of fossil fuels, the drilling into the Arctic, and the opening up of formerly protected areas. Coronavirus crisis will not displace the imperative to act on climate. Instead, the immediate and long-term crisis are linked, requiring the same sort of government intervention. A massive program to ramp up electric vehicles, carbon-free power, and energy efficiency throughout the economy. Now, some of the pushback against renewable energy and electric vehicles I addressed in some earlier videos as well. But remember, with electric vehicles, regardless if you're claiming the power is coming from dirty power sources, which it doesn't have to, they do improve the immediate air quality. From the article, the planned $2 trillion federal investment marks a step up from the $1.7 trillion plan Biden unveiled during the primary. He is also accelerating the timetable for action, seeking to put the United States on track to achieve net zero emissions 4 years earlier than his original goal of 2050. These changes come after concerted effort by his campaign to craft a unity platform with supporters of Senator Bernie Sanders. Now here we look at some of the push and pull between elements of corporate America and then elements of the climate activist movement. So quoting, now the article quotes from a Sunrise Movement activist. Sunrise Movement is a youth climate movement. Quoting from a Sunrise Movement activist, any adequate plan to address the climate crisis must also be a plan to recover our broken economy and center those who have been disenfranchised in the solutions. So here, that's fantastic because one of the criticisms of the environmental movement has always been, oh, it's elitist, it's not taking average people into account. Well, here, Sunrise Movement and these type of movements are trying to include disenfranchised communities in any benefits that will accrue from a switch towards renewable energy. Under the plan, according to the article, disadvantaged communities would receive 40% of the clean energy and infrastructure benefits. New monitoring of pollution would be mandated in communities at fence line of refineries and other facilities that have borne the brunt of the nation's pollution burdens. So here, this is the type of thing that regardless of what you think about what one thinks about climate change, deny it or not, better monitoring of pollution, well, who could argue with that? At fence line communities with refineries, well, people live near these refineries. The Biden plan is consistent with a recent call for a massive reinvestment in coal communities across the nation. So again, we get back to that just transition. You know, Trump, they like to say, well, we're protecting these jobs. Well, here, we're going to invest into those places that have been both suffered from the health consequences of the fossil fuel industry, but also have had job benefits from it. Written by members of those communities, said Tom Kay, the senior legislative representative of the Appalachian Voices, a nonprofit that works for healthy ecosystems and resilient local economies in coal country. The Coal Transition Platform from the Just Transition Fund was endorsed by 80 groups from environmental to business to labor, based in part on the premise that the nation has a moral obligation to help coal-dependent communities transition to new economies because of the sacrifices they have made. The plan also calls for broadband in rural communities. Now, the article also goes on to cite the United Auto Workers, representing 400,000 active workers in one of the nation's largest manufacturing sectors. The United Auto Workers praised Biden's emphasis on jobs and the transition to electric vehicles. So here we see again that tension between jobs and the environment, but really it's more about what types of jobs versus what types of jobs. Will we be building large gas guzzlers or electric vehicles? But furthermore, now here is where you get into these criticisms of corporate working with the corporate establishment. Well, from an environmental standpoint, would it actually make more sense to simply retrofit existing vehicles with electric motors? The article goes on to quote some support from the West, because apparently the Biden plan also calls for, like the Sanders plan did, some wilderness set-aside, regenerative agriculture and the like, which will benefit tourism and that type of thing out west. So apparently there's some support among some Western politicians for it. But the article goes on to warn, not all Westerners were happy with the Biden plan. Kathleen Sagama, president of the Western Energy Alliance and an oil and gas industry trade group, linked the Biden plan with the Green New Deal, saying it fueled alarmism about climate change while envisioning a radical remaking of the energy sector, and hence the economy. Quoting her, "Now this is the real politics. There are organizations like this with a lot of money, and they will pay to influence the public." This oil and gas representative goes on to say, "We'll focus on moderating these policies once Biden moves from appeasing the left during the campaign to potentially governing. His vulnerability in Pennsylvania, which has caused him to tone down the rhetoric on banning fracking, suggests there is room to be reasonable on these issues." Quoting from that oil and gas energy representative. So my point in adding in those quotes is to show viewers that there's a real struggle here. This isn't as simple as, well, Biden's not good enough on these issues. It's where he's getting pushed from. How powerful are environmentalists and how strong is environmental thinking within the public? Because these other organizations will be funding efforts to tear down whatever he might do. So when I heard similar attacks against Al Gore from the so-called left and some environmentalists saying, well, he's not good enough. But that's the problem. It's not taking into account this real politics. So my stance would be push Biden, work with Biden, get him in there, and then push him to be greener. Because the alternative is dealing with an administration that has put the environmental movement completely on the defense. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please share, please subscribe, please like, please comment in a mannerly fashion, please support, and until next time, peace be with you.